Order the April 8th, 2015 meeting of the Portland Development Commission. Gina, would you call the roll?
Chair Kelly.
Here.
Commissioner Dixon.
Here.
Commissioner Edlin. Absent. Commissioner Moyle.
Here.
Commissioner Wilhoit.
Here.
Welcome, Commissioner Wilhoit, out there
in
in whatever land you're in.
I'm in La La Land.
It's going to be a long meeting, so we're going to try to move along expeditiously. Commissioner Moyle, do you have a report?
Just a couple things real quick. On St. Patrick's Day, the Portland Workforce Alliance had their annual event at the Convention Center where employers and apprenticeship programs set up booths inside the Convention Center, and then high school youth from around the city come in. And it's a great event. I've been to it several times. Governor Brown gave some good remarks, and there's a lot of really inspiring, highly motivated young adults there. So that's always a fun event.
Thank you. Commissioner Dixon.
I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Commissioner Wilhoit.
Nope, I don't have anything to report.
Okay, I've got a couple of things. Just in the interim time since the last meeting, of course, I've been to a number of check-ins in the mayor's office and had one strategic planning meeting. And then on the 30th, Patrick and I testified before the Portland Development Commission, which I had a little bit of fun with that because Gina was kind enough to send over some press releases, our press clippings from when my father was on the commission in 1988, and he testified before the commission about the PDC budget. And in this, the summary of the clipping is that after short comments about the budget, he then proceeded to admonish the commission, the Portland City Commission, about the need for leadership in Northeast Portland in 1988. So I handed out a copy of that press release, our press clipping, to all of the commissioners. And at the end of my talk, I said, well, something along the lines of, this was what my dad would say to you today if he were here. So it was all kind of fun. So that's my report. Patrick.
Thank you, Chair Kelly, and good afternoon, commissioners. Once again, keeping busy between our board meetings here. And yes, we did have a rather uneventful appearance before City Council at the end of March. And it was fascinating to read that article and how little time seems to change. The issues don't change. You think we get so much done, and the issues that we're grappling with are just unique to our times, and they're actually the same issues that our predecessors were dealing with. That same week, we actually went back to City Council to finally get approval for the urban renewal area amendments that have been working their way through Council for the past year. So this was the 6 amendments to our existing urban renewal areas designed to reduce the overall scope of urban renewal, and these amendments returned about $800 million of assessed value to the tax rolls. And this was one of the high priorities for Mayor Hales when he ran for office. But it also allowed us to increase the amount of investment available for affordable housing, and it also allowed us to make good on our commitments to Portland State University, as well as to the other opportunities that we're seeing in the city, namely around OHSU's expansion and the Night Cancer Challenge, and the opportunities from light rail opening on the South Waterfront and the Central East Side. So after a lot of back and forth, a lot of amendments, a lot of delayed votes, we finally had a full vote on all 6, and 5 of the 6 were unanimous votes, and it was only Central East Side amendment that didn't get a unanimous vote. So once again, incredible achievement on the part of staff. A lot of staff work went into this. And before I get into that, I also just want to acknowledge the support of the board And of course, the mayor, like I said, made this a very visible commitment of his. And so all along the way, everybody that we were working with, both in council, externally, knew that this was something that was very important to the mayor. But also Jillian Detweiler from the mayor's office played a big role. And actually before her, Ed McNamara, his previous policy advisor on this, kicked it off. So it was great working with mayor's office, folks from other commissioner offices, Commissioner Fish, Commissioner Saltzman, all of them, Fritz and Novik, they all got involved. But here within PDC, this definitely took up a lot of time and attention over many months, and I just want to recognize a handful of people. I just want to start by recognizing Kimberly Branham, who really led this effort from the beginning, coordinated it, and I think worried most over it. And Kimberly is basically 9 months pregnant at this point, so had we had another delay in vote, I think she would have been reporting in from the maternity ward. But thankfully, we got it in under the wire, but it really was a testament to her leadership. And then closely behind Kimberly was Justin Douglas right over here, who managed a lot of the moving parts in this process and had to, once again, produce new documents on a regular basis to deal with all the changes to the different amendments. So thank you, Justin. And then we just had, it was a full team effort throughout the organization. So you have people like Tony Barnes, who's going to come up and speak in a second, but we ran, I don't know how many different versions, hundreds of versions of budget projections based on different scenarios. We had, obviously, all of the urban renewal areas that were being amended were all in a central city. And so the different scenarios that were contemplated involved all the work within our central city urban renewal areas. And so Lisa Alboaf, who I think is behind one of the posts back there, her team, Lisa and her team, did a great job in keeping up with all that. And they still continue to work on our development agreements. We have our development agreement with PSU that this board approved, and then we also have the negotiating agreement, the still negotiation agreement with ZRZ Realty with Zidell, and so that's been Lisa's team point on that. But we had all the work from the public affairs team. We had all sorts of different mapping exercises that we had to go through. Robert Smith does GIS for us. So there's a long list of people, but it was a great team effort, and we had a nice celebration last week when it was finally over. In just a bit, you're going to hear from Kimberly, who's going to provide an update on the strategic plan, another multi-month effort that is hopefully coming to a conclusion. And she'll talk about the process. But since our last meeting, we've had open houses and basically concluded the public input part of the process. So lots of great staff work on that, and particularly the 2 open houses where we had many staff available to answer questions from the public. As you know, we've been promoting a property that we own in Gateway at 106th and Halsey. It's adjacent to the publicly owned park, proposed park by Portland Parks and Rec. And so we had an RFQ that we issued a few months back to solicit development proposals for that site. It's about an acre site. And so we got back a few responses, and we figured out that we really hadn't issued our RFQ properly. We hadn't defined enough of our objectives, nor had we articulated the budget for this property. So we just reissued it, and so we're encouraging all respondents who are interested in the site to submit a proposal, and we are providing a tour. I guess that's tomorrow at 9 a.m. at the site. So anybody who's interested in either finding out about the tour or responding to the RFQ can go to our website at pdc.us. Some other news from our neighborhood urban renewal areas. I think you might have read that Lentz is getting baseball, finally. There was lots of talk years ago about the Portland Beavers moving to Lentz, and that obviously didn't happen, but Lentz is now signed up to get a semi-pro summer league baseball team to play out of Walker Stadium, which is in Lentz Park. PDC is contributing $200,000 of the $650,000 cost to help do the renovations at Walker Stadium in Lentz, and it'll be it'll feature it's a wood bat league. So if you're baseball fans, there's the summer college students play in the summer in these wood bat leagues to get them ready for the pros. And so there'll be a team that's based here, and they'll play, I think, next summer in Lentz. I think they were even looking for names for the team. But the Lentz Neighborhood Association was very much excited about this and came to us and asked if we would participate in the funding of the project. So we were happy to do that. Not far from there, I think you're all aware that the Portland Mercado is now unofficially open. It's doing a kind of a soft opening, but it actually has its official grand opening this Saturday, the 11th. The Portland Mercado, as you know, is a Latino public market that is providing space for a whole range of small businesses, mainly food vendors, and we worked extensively with Hacienda CDC to bring that project to fruition. It's on a piece of property that we purchased a few years back, and so they're leasing that property from us, and then we have helped provide financing along with a whole range of other funding sources. So it's been long in the making, and we're all very excited about it. So anybody who's thinking about it should go on the 11th. I'm quite certain it's going to be a great time. In North Portland, we actually hosted a branding workshop earlier in March to bring the community together to talk about how to brand North Lombard. So with the expansion of the interstate urban renewal area a few years back, we picked up the stretch of Lombard. And if you've been on that stretch of Lombard, there's a lot of great businesses there, but just because of the kind of long commercial nature of it, it doesn't really have a great identity. And so we hosted a workshop that had great turnout and lots of great ideas, and that was organized by Carol Hersberg on our neighborhood team, but Kate Dean, Lisa Norwood, and Allison Wicks also played great roles in that. We also had a big role in the Oregon Manufacturing Summit, which was on March 11th. We have two specialists on our staff, in Pam Neal and Kevin Johnson, who work with the manufacturing community, both just doing outreach to businesses, working directly with businesses to help provide resources to them, but also working directly in supply chains to OEMs, to larger manufacturers. And so Kevin and Pam are well known in our local manufacturing sector, and so these kind of events are great opportunities to showcase the work that we're doing. We had two other, well, I guess we had a handful of other big events in March. On March 17th, we launched something called our Early Adopter Program. That's a program in which PDC tries to broker relationships between private companies. A lot of them are technology companies that have new technologies, new products that they're looking to sell, with government agencies, city bureaus. And so we held a kickoff event to bring representatives from both private companies and from city bureaus together. And it was a great success. We had actually, I think, over 100 people in attendance, and it was the first time many of these individuals had ever been together in the same room. So people who normally work within the Portland building and don't have a chance to meet startups and startup companies who don't know what it's like to interact with city employees, they actually spent a day together, and it was the kickoff of kind of brainstorming about different opportunities to work together. And so now we have an online kind of matching service called Switchboard, where city bureaus can post challenges that they're trying to address, and companies can respond with potential solutions, and we're already getting matching activity out of that. Amy Nagy on our Central City team and Jared Weiner on the economic development team are the two folks who spearheaded that effort. That same day, we also launched our revised international strategy in collaboration with Greater Portland, Inc. It's called Greater Portland Global, and this is the work we've been doing with the Brookings Institution. This is now kind of the 2.0 version of it, and it brings together our export work with our foreign direct investment strategy. That's a new strategy designed to attract investment both in the form of direct investment in projects and companies, but also mergers and acquisition activity, attract that to the region. And so there's a big launch event on the 17th. The report itself was largely the work of Michael Gerton, who is on our economic development team and is really our international expert. So Michael was, it's mainly his brainchild, and he really brought together a lot of folks around the region to bring this together. But we also had tremendous help from Chris Harder, who heads that team, as well as Lisa Norwood and Ann Mangan from our communications team. The report is a very slick document, so you can check it out on our website, but we have hard copies as well. Some of us also attended the evening grand opening of the new PNCA building. If you haven't been to the building yet, it's just a spectacular building. And the story I like to tell is I go that way home every day, and in the winter it's usually dark out, and so I'm used to seeing that building dark and no one inside. And I remember a few weeks back going home and looking and seeing all the lights on in the building for the first time in, it seems, in years. And so the event was at night, and you can just tell it's a fantastic addition to the neighborhood, and obviously a lot of people worked to make that happen, and PDC obviously played a big role, and we got quite a bit of kudos for our work there. We have a couple upcoming business seminars. One is next week on the 15th in Lentz. So this is in partnership with Lentz Grown, the local business district in Lentz Town Center, and this is on digital marketing. And then we have one, I don't have the date in front of me, we have one in Gateway at the end of the month. I think that one's on legal services, but all this information, once again, is on our website. So I'll end there before I get on to the staff announcements. But there's a lot of other information people can check out on our website, and we have future board meetings coming up that I can fill in the rest of this. So we're very excited. We have 2 new PDC employees to introduce today. I think I had kept you in the loop on the hiring process for these 2 individuals, but we're quite excited at how it's turned out. On my left, we have our new neighborhood manager, and this is, I'm going to butcher, Shari Shire, am I saying it right? Shire, Shari Shire, who's our new neighborhood manager, and Shari's new to the Portland region. She just moved here recently with her husband and her 6-year-old son. Since she's moved here, she's been consulting with the Housing Development Center on affordable housing community projects. And then prior to coming to Portland, she spent 10 years working in private development and project management on a variety of different real estate projects, urban projects, affordable housing projects, and kind of all aspects of those projects, financing, construction, and closing. And then prior to that, she spent 14 years doing redevelopment in California, primarily in LA, and then some time in San Jose. And so she has extensive experience with all of the issues that we grapple with in all of our work around neighborhood redevelopment. So we feel very excited to have Shari here, and as you can tell, her experience really fits the position we were trying to fill. So welcome, Shari. And then the person next to her is Tori Campbell, and Tori is our new Senior Business Development Coordinator on our Community Economic Development team. And Tori, unlike Shari, actually comes from Portland. He's been in Portland a long time, went to high school here in Portland. He went to Marshall High School, is that right? But Tori comes to us from MISO, which is the Microenterprise Services of Oregon, but it's a microenterprise organization and small business technical assistance provider, doing a lot of work, I think, in North and Northeast Portland. And we had the pleasure of working with Tori. MISO was one of the providers that we've been funding, and so we knew of his work quite extensively. And so, as with MISO, Tori was actually working in our Cully and 42nd Avenue MPIs, as well as businesses in North and Northeast Portland. Prior to that, Tori spent 20 years working, I think, in a variety of not-for-profits around issues of faith, equity, and justice. And as I mentioned, he went to high school in Portland and lives in Gateway, so he's intimately familiar with our neighborhoods and the work that we're trying to do here. So welcome, Tori. Thanks.
Welcome to both of you.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, so this may be the largest group of minutes that we've okayed, at least in my time here. Can we do them all at once?
Yes.
Okay. So the chair would accept a motion to approve all the minutes that are on the schedule: December 11th, December 18th retreat, January 21st, January 28th budget work session, and the February 11th meeting. I know I read through them and I didn't see any problems. I'm sure that the other commissioners have done that as well.
I would make a motion to accept the minutes.
And I will second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. The ayes have it. Minutes are approved. I don't believe we have anybody here for public comment. So we'll move on to item number 6, the consent agenda. This is an action item requesting Portland City Council to issue bonds to refund bonds previously issued for the Airport Way urban renewal area and providing for related matters. Do we have any staff input, or I think we've been through all that. It seems pretty straightforward.
Right.
Sure.
On consent items, if you want to discuss, we pull them off consent. If there's no discussion, we just vote.
That's right.
I'd make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Ayes have it. The motion carries. Regular agenda, action item, authorizing the executive director to sell transportation system development charge credits, resolution 7104. Geraldene, you're on.
Okay, great. Hello, I'm Geraldene Moyle, and I'm a senior project manager in the Urban Development Department. And I'm here today to request approval from the board to authorize the executive director to sell transportation system development credits. And these credits are in the amount of $520,000 at a face value of 1-to-1 to Geraldene Development. Just some background, the credits are citywide transportation system development charge credits, more commonly known as TSDCs. And TSDCs are fees assessed by the City of Portland to new development and changes in use. TSDC credits are provided by PBOT to a property owner or a development when a certain type of street improvement is made with a new development or a building use change reduces those trips. And the credits, when they're issued, are valid for 10 years. And if you don't use them within 10 years, they become null and void. They're worth zero. We acquired $1 million in TSDC credits in 2010 from OHSU. These credits were a component in exchange for PDC relinquishing property rights on Block 33 in South Waterfront. OHSU had obtained those credits in 2006. So the important thing is, while we got them in 2010, they still expire in October 2016 because the 10 years started in 2006. And to date, we have utilized 480,000 of those $1 million credits with projects in the district. So what we have left is $520,000 worth of TSDC credits. Since they expire in October 2016, and we have no anticipated PDC project ready to use those credits by that date, the intent is that we sell these credits and that we sell them at a 1-to-1 value. Selling these credits will provide program income for the North Macadam urban renewal area, and this is income that could be used for a variety of projects such as affordable housing or infrastructure such as Bond Avenue in the North Macadam district. While the goal is to sell them at a 1-to-1 value, the important thing to note is that 1-to-1 value is actually above market value. First of all, they expire in October 2016. And a brief review of permit submittals to the City of Portland indicate that there are approximately 40 projects in for building permit and a similar amount in for land use approval right now. And what's difficult to determine is which of any of those projects would be ready to pay a transportation system development charge by October 2016. And of those that were able to pay that, if any would be interested in paying one-to-one value for our credits, given that, one, we've had previous offers for these credits that were discounted, 20%. A private transaction of similar credits in North Macadam had a 5% discount. And there's an ease in just making the payment to PBOT versus doing what I would say is a two-step transaction in purchasing our credits and then having to take those credits down to PBOT, whereas you could just go and pay with your building permit. We do actually have a purchaser who's interested, Girding Eadlin Development. They have several projects in the pipeline that would meet the October 2016 deadline. And since the credits are about to expire, Girding Eadlin has, as a favor to PDC, offered to pay us the full value of the TSDC credits and to go through this two-step transaction rather than just paying PBOT the TSDC. So therefore, by authorizing the sale of the credits to Girding Eadlin Development, we achieve, one, the use of the credits prior to October 2016. We obtain above-market income to PDC, which can be used for other urban renewal activities in North Macadam. And both of these maximize our public investment in urban renewal projects in the district. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any further questions about the credits.
Any questions, commissioners?
I don't have any questions.
Charles?
Yeah, the only questions I have relate to how we manage these types of credits and what the process is for actually just making it known to the market they're available for purchase.
So we sought out other development projects in North Macadam and inquired with other development firms if they were interested in acquiring or purchasing our credits. We did receive one interested party, and they offered a 20% discount to acquire them.
Is it safe
Good
to?
job negotiating full value.
It's safe to say that anybody in that district would have had the opportunity if they were probably going to be.
Correct. And
Yes.
the private transaction I alluded to was in the district, and it was from a developer to another developer, and they did a 5% discount in order to get rid of the credit, to sell the credits in a timely manner.
And I understand this is the totality of these types of credits that we have under our control right now?
Correct.
I don't have anything else.
Chair would accept a motion.
Can I just make one observation?
Sure.
I think part of what might play into here, as far as the 10-year deadline, is if we purchased these in 2006, the construction economy was rocking and rolling through 2007. And then in 08 just went on its nose. So there probably wasn't anybody looking for these for several years. So
Right.
I think that the opportunity to get rid of them at full value the year before they expire is a good deal. So I would make a motion to accept Resolution 7104.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item, number 8, is information item update on the Broadway Corridor Framework Program. Sarah Harpole and Eric Jacobson.
We have a change of cast.
I'm gathering that. It's okay.
Hi, I'm Gina Bielen, Director of Real Estate and Lending. I'm Sarah Harpole, Senior Project Manager in the Urban Development Department. We're here today to co-present 2 items. First, I'll provide an overview of development planning activities underway in the Broadway corridor area, and then I'll hand it over to Gina to present a resolution regarding exclusive negotiations with the U.S. Postal Service regarding the potential acquisition of their site. These 2 items are closely integrated. Together, they help inform potential public investment and development opportunities associated with the post office property and the surrounding area. The Broadway Corridor Study Area is a 24-acre site in the River District Urban Renewal Area, and it represents one of the most prominent opportunities for influencing the fabric of the Central City and strengthening connections to adjacent neighborhoods and the surrounding region. The site is located at the intersection of the Rose Quarter, the Pearl District, and Old Town Chinatown, and connects to the Central Business District via mass transit. The area is designated a multimodal hub with connections to Amtrak, Greyhound, streetcar, light rail, and the bus mall. As you can see here, PDC owns several properties within the study area, including Union Station and the full block we call Block R. This effort will also allow us to think about how to better position Union Station as a gateway to the city and is well timed to coordinate with conceptual design work we already have underway specific to Union Station. Over the past 43 years, dating back to the 1972 downtown plan, at least 12 policies, studies, or reports have considered some or all of the Broadway Corridor study area. But most recently, the Central City 2035 West Quadrant Plan, recently adopted by City Council, calls for PDC and its partners to relocate the post office and develop the site, and specifically calls for a master plan process prior to redevelopment of this site. So we're approaching this requirement in a two-phase process. The first is to develop a framework plan consisting of two primary components. First, we'll establish a strategic vision consisting of looking at guiding principles based on an assessment of existing conditions and opportunities within the area. We'll consider adjacent uses, development pipelines, circulation patterns, etc. We'll then build upon the strategic vision and explore at a conceptual level the development opportunities of the post office site. This component will help inform likely public infrastructure costs, development potential, and the residual land value associated with the site, and will be an important component for informing future decisions regarding the potential acquisition. If we reach a point of certainty regarding the acquisition of the site, we'll be prepared to initiate phase 2, which is the more detailed master plan called for by the Central City 2035 plan, and will build upon that prior framework plan process. To complete the framework plan, PDC is seeking an experienced multidisciplinary team. We issued a request for proposals on Friday, April 3rd, and responses are due April 30th. Due to the exceptional opportunity represented by the study area, it is our preference to find a consultant team with a combination of national or global experience and a portfolio containing exemplary accomplishments in urban planning and design, coupled with local permitting and market familiarity. The contract awarded under this RFP will be a focus on the framework plan and its two primary components. However, we will have the opportunity, but not the obligation, to negotiate a contract for the completion of the future master plan process as well. The framework plan will be formulated through a series of charrettes with input from Stakeholder Advisory Committee, a Technical Advisory Committee, and 3 public open houses at key project milestones. In June through July, we will develop the strategic vision, starting with the assessment of the existing conditions, and then identify the guiding principles, goals, and objectives for the broader area. Moving into late July and August, we'll prepare, test, and refine conceptual plan alternatives for the post office site. And then in September, we will finalize the preferred concept plan and the framework plan report. We anticipate presenting the final report to the PDC board and City Council in October, and will provide status briefings throughout this process. Do you have questions for me regarding this process before I hand it over to Gina?
Questions? What's our budget for this?
We've estimated ranging between $150,000 to $250,000, again, depending on the composition of the team and their location, both locally and broader.
Any other questions?
Do we have an accounting of how much we've spent on the post office discussions since 2007?
That's in the upcoming presentation.
Okay.
In terms of the selection for the consultant, you said that it could be local, but it could be out of state. Who's going to determine that selection process?
We'll have an evaluation committee, so in the process of identifying the representation of that evaluation committee. It'll probably be a combination of PDC staff, Bureau of Planning staff, and others. And ideally, it'll be a combination of both local and broader, so a mix of firms.
I mean, so I think we are, I think it's safe to say we are looking for that combination of talent, but it could be a local firm that then brings in some national exports. But I think the goal is to have a broader perspective on this than simply, you know, people who are just working in Portland.
Other questions?
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, Commissioners, and Executive Director Quinton. We're here today to authorize execution of an agreement. Whoops. I gotta go push my button. There. Isn't that gorgeous? Post Office Service. Pursue exclusive negotiations with the United States Postal Service related to the possible acquisition of the 13.4-acre site property located at 715 Northwest Hoyt Street in the River District. If this action is approved, PDC real estate staff will move forward in parallel with the strategic vision portion of the framework plan that Sarah just outlined. I'll briefly highlight some of the history and background of the site. So starting back in 2007, PD staff participated in negotiations with the Postal Service. This came out of the 1988 Central City Plan and the 2001 Pearl District Development Plan approved by the Portland City Council that the City of Portland should reach an agreement with the U.S. Postal Service permitting PDC to redevelop and reuse portions of the property and encourage relocation of the regional distribution facility while retaining a retail postal facility to serve the River District urban renewal area. PDC staff has participated in negotiations since 2007, resulting in an approval of an LOI and escrow agreement through Resolution 6565 in March of 2008. So between 2008 and 2013, the LOI expressed an intent for PDC and the Postal Service to move forward with due diligence and to negotiate a binding and formal purchase and sale agreement. The escrow agreement provided PDC to place $2 million into an escrow account. Of that amount, $500,000 would be released to the U.S. Postal Service upon execution of the LOI and the escrow agreement. The Postal Service conducted environmental studies and remediation and moved to a no further action letter issued by the Department of Environmental Quality for this specific site. Market conditions and impasse in negotiating the terms of the PSA resulted in the escrow agreement expiring on March of 2013, after several extensions. Currently, there is no agreement between PDC and the Postal Service regarding the purchase of the downtown property. The remaining $1.5 million in the escrow account will be returned to PDC. Fast forward to 2013 through current. Although both the LOI and the escrow agreement expired, over the past year, interest has once again piqued its interest, culminating in a meeting with the Postal Service headquarters in Washington, D.C. this past March. Both PDC and USPS staff and legal counsel discussed several of the key issues and the potential path to move forward with further negotiations. The parties came to agreement that more definitive information about the potential replacement facility and location was essential before proceeding further. Completion of 30% design documents would provide more accurate estimates of the cost of this replacement facility. The approval of this action is recommended to advance the negotiations for this project. So now we move to the deal terms as currently in conversation. PDC agrees to make a payment to the Postal Service in the amount of $500,000 as consideration for the Postal Service agreeing to exclusive negotiations with PDC to see if an agreement can be reached over the next few months. The Postal Service will be provided with and relocate to an acceptable replacement facility with a payment, this payment of $500,000 being applicable to the purchase price of the downtown site in the event that a negotiation of a purchase and sale agreement and actual closing does occur. Either PDC or the Post Office may terminate such negotiations at any time for any reason without liability. The $500,000 payment would be placed into an escrow account for the benefit of the Postal Service, with funds to be used exclusively for mutually agreeable costs associated with determining the facility of both the replacement facility in the Portland metro area and PDC's acquisition of the downtown property. The parties currently are contemplating that funds be used to pay for the cost of the 30% design documents for an acceptable replacement facility and other due diligence costs. This proposed action will provide the further information necessary about the feasibility and cost of entering into a formal agreement. At the receipt of these design documents, neither party is obligated to proceed further. No, I'm not going to go. Whoops. So anyway, a little highlight about the budget. This particular action doesn't require any additional approvals of the budget. If the action is approved, the described $500,000 payment is paid. Then there's still $1 million remaining from the original escrow account and can, with PDC board approval, be applied to future efforts to acquire and develop the downtown site or for other purposes. If this action is approved, PD staff will return to the board in the next 90 days with the additional information to determine if there is a no-go or a go move forward with this transaction. In the fiscal year 2014-15 River District budget and 5-year forecast, there is a $37.4 million line item to support the possible acquisition. If there's approval of this action, it will not currently, this particular action will not currently affect any of the adopted budget. So the total projected cost of acquiring the downtown property and relocating the Postal Service to an appropriate replacement facility is likely to exceed that budgeted amount of $37.4 million. Completion of the 30% design documents would allow us to more accurately refine these costs. While the design documents are underway, PDC will investigate and identify financial sources to fund the anticipated gap. Of note, it's premature to know the cost of the replacement facility, the location of the replacement facility, the possible programming and plan for a downtown site, and currently the U.S. Postal Service is working through their internal decision-making process. Questions?
Commissioner Mullis?
One of them was answered when, if I heard you right, this, if we choose to commit another $500,000, it would come out of money that's already in escrow?
Correct.
Okay, and so that would leave $1 million. I think I understand that this doesn't guarantee that we get there, but it takes us to the next step.
Correct.
Okay. And obviously, committing public funds like that, I mean, $500,000 is not a small amount, but it seems to me to be a pretty unique opportunity. That if we didn't do this, if we didn't take this step to investigate it to see if it was worth moving forward, folks in the future, I think, would look back and say we made a bad decision. So I'm in favor of moving forward.
Commissioner Dixon?
The original $2 million that were in the escrow account, was it originally set up because of the anticipation of something like this occurring?
It was originally established so that they would actually sign an LOA and escrow agreement so we could negotiate a purchase and sale agreement.
I see. And so we kept it there for all that time, just out of curiosity, why?
So the actual escrow agreement was extended through March of 2013, at which point in time it did expire. And after that, negotiations came to an impasse, but there was always conversation back and forth with the Postal Service.
And if they find a suitable replacement and, you know, this transaction is favorable, I mean, I think that's the only time anyone's going to be happy, is if it's favorable. Obviously, if it's not, we're all going to look really bad. But if indeed it is favorable and they find a suitable replacement, you said a portion of that is towards the purchase, correct?
Right, so the $500,000 in this anticipated action in the event that this moves forward, would it apply to the purchase price. The remainder of the purchase price would be whatever the cost for the relocation facility, relocating them there,
Okay.
would be the actual cost for purchasing a site.
If you think about, so think the cost of them moving into a new facility includes this first $500,000 of work that we're doing. So basically,
Exactly.
right, so it's going towards the cost, the ultimate cost.
Okay.
Sorry.
If in the middle of them doing the work and they decide they don't want to move forward, a portion of that money could be returned to us if you're right in the middle of the
Are you speaking of the 500,000?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Wilhoit?
Yeah. I guess one question I want to ask, and it may be early, but what's changed with the post office in the last 2 years as far as their willingness to move forward now?
What we have observed in the past year is interest in negotiations, responses from them. A couple of things that they have highlighted for us. One is that they're increasing their business about 14% per year. They've got the contract with Amazon. And so at a point in time, there was a property that's under development that they saw as an opportunity that might work for them. And they were actually able to see their operations be more effective and cost-effective and efficient. And suddenly it became a thought that perhaps they would like to entertain the idea of looking at some options for a new facility.
And given that this item was on the table when we entered the negotiations the first time, i.e. finding a new facility for them, what do we have that serves as somewhat of a launching pad for moving forward with regard to that relocation? Because I thought we had done some of that already.
There was never a determination about what that particular property might be. And in our meeting with the Postal Service back in March, they actually increased the boundaries for acceptable sites to move forward.
And as far as that type of a study, we're basically, if we agree to this, allowing for up to $500,000 of study costs. What is that? Am I misinterpreting that?
It's due diligence cost associated with the 30% design documents, which would inform the price of the replacement facility. We would couple that with whatever site was located and add in the cost of the land and then the relocation costs.
But in a nutshell, we could see $500,000 spent on that, right?
$500,000 spent on the design drawings and that due diligence,
Yeah.
yes. Correct.
And we don't see any need to cap that anywhere out of the 500 because of the way it's written, part of it is for the post office entering into exclusive negotiation with us, and part of it is for that study, 30% design study. Do we see any need to cap that?
Actually, 100% of that money, the whole $500,000, isn't going to be used for anything but the design and the due diligence. It's not actually going to the Postal Service. It'll be mutually released from escrow to cover the cost of the due diligence and the design work.
And Commissioner Moyle and I obviously have been here for the duration of this negotiation with the post office. And there was some heartburn about the escrow amount and releasing more money a few years back. But I'm not thrilled about releasing another $500,000. So I guess I'm asking you and/or you, Patrick, to tell us that the only way we continue to move this forward is that we commit to $500,000 of additional money being released. I would agree with everyone that it's a critically valuable site. We don't have anything else like it where we can engage in a development of this type. But I guess what I want to know is there no other way to continue moving forward with the post office without this $500,000 commitment?
Yeah. Our assessment of the situation is that this is the sole path forward for us to, in any near-term time frame for us to acquire the facility. So this is the next step that the Postal Service would have to go through to begin to examine the feasibility of a new site and pick a new site and then do the the early design work on a new facility, so this is the cost, this is the first part of the cost that we would then have to pick up. So if we're not willing to pick this up, that they're not going to proceed to this next step. So you're in a moment in time, as Gina mentioned, where you can wait on the future of the Postal Service. This facility is not technically outdated. It serves their needs. As currently, right now, the Postal Service does have changing dynamics in their business model. The whole relationship with Amazon, I do think has altered the idea that the Postal Service is somehow in decline from an operations standpoint. So you're really waiting on what's going to happen, and I think that could be a 10, 20-year process before the Postal Service on its own gets to some realization that they need a different facility. So if we want to expedite that, and that's been one of the goals of our work in this district, then this is the next step for us.
Yeah, I'm just wrestling how we convince someone that they need to move other than by telling them we're going to pay them a lot of money.
Well, how do you get convinced them to move without paying them money?
No, I said I'm just wrestling with how we convince them that they should be motivated to move other than by telling them we're going to pay them a lot of money. And it's kind of just a rhetorical thought. But I'm once again recognize the significant value of the location and the things that we can do with that location and how that can benefit the city and the state and the region. If you're telling me that this is the only way we can move it forward, I think we have to take advantage of the opportunity. Doesn't mean we have to love the notion that post office is not willing to engage in their own investigation and we work out a reimbursement rather than paying for it up front. But it sounds like that's not an option.
No, it's not an option.
Okay.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
In terms of the design committee, is the post office selecting who they're working with for those, or do we have any control over?
So they have basically a boilerplate schematic design that they use for regional centers, and then they go through their process of going through an RFP process to select one of approved. They have like 4 approved people that they've worked with for decades. Okay. And then whomever's selected would actually do that scope of work. And so it's not site specific, it's building specific, but it doesn't have a lot of variation except for the footing.
And it's not even necessarily a local firm, or?
They're national firms that they use, and it's it's what's required by the U.S. Postal Service federal regulations.
So thank you. We've got a couple of public testimonies to come up. We will call you back if we get any questions as a result of that. Otherwise, if we could have Barry Smith and Patricia Gardner come forward. Only because I received Barry's sheet first, I'll ask him to
Oh, okay, I'll go first.
go first. That's okay.
My name is Barry Smith. I'm an architect here in Portland. My address is 715 Southwest Morrison Street, Suite 909, here in Portland. I passed out a handout. I've been looking since 2013 at developing this site privately and trying to encourage the Postal Service to move. Congratulations on getting to where you've gotten. I think it's a great opportunity. And I think we talked to a lot of the same people about who might be interested in actually developing the site or being involved with future construction. The points that I want to make are very quickly that we saw a pattern of land use in some public sites that were disposed to the private sector. I did the master plan work for Terminal 1, and that didn't turn out the way anybody had envisioned. The industries that are looking at Oregon and Portland right now that can provide immediate jobs and the type of jobs that go beyond our projections are looking for large urban spaces with large footprint buildings with very tall, high ceilings and very big spans. If you can imagine the Widening Kennedy building that's kind of a prototype that if we had 5 more of them, I think we could get them into commerce very quickly and start streaking beyond our job expectations. The problems when you look at the site, on page 3, you'll see the historic tax map, and the central city plan will pretty much encourage or demand that the historic grid and right-of-way system be preserved. When I looked at doing that, I saw that there's about a 35% reduction in available land for being developed. And when I start looking at the numbers and evaluating office or creative space development compared to residential development, which I have experience in, I'm also a licensed real estate broker, so I know the kind of market conditions that we're dealing with. We'll find that the highest and best use in terms of return on investment will be more residential development in the pattern that we saw throughout the railroad yards. And the EXD district, when it was adopted for this area, was specifically intended to have be an employment district more than grocery stores and nightclubs and things like that. So as we go forward with our community goals, there's going to be 2 prongs that I think you all are going to need to look at. One is talking to the Planning Commission about some more imaginative way of restoring some of the public right-of-ways, particularly with the Broadway bridge ramps blocking some of the through connections that we were talking about earlier in the Broadway master plan. And also taking a look at some of the environmental impacts on the site. I know there was a study that it's not necessarily a contaminated site, but in terms of redeveloping it, there is going to be significant cost, and I'm thinking that a replacement facility cost may be more expensive than the obligation that the city will take on when they buy it. That's my testimony.
Thank you very much. Tricia.
Hi, I'm Patty Gardner. I'm here on behalf of the Pearl District Neighborhood Association, and we've long been involved in this project and in our desire to see something happen there. And I want to respond to a couple of points that some of you or the commissioners made during their questions. First off, the way to think about this site, and I've said this repeatedly in front of you, this is a national level site. It is 100% a state level site. The size of this site is bigger than the city of Portland, and we should be thinking about it and the opportunities for that in that vein. There's no site that I can think of in the downtown core that has so many opportunities that we could think about. And from bringing a campus in, employment certainly, and things like that. And one place I would argue you should look at is Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Technology Center is a very good example of how you can leverage a site of this scale, and how you can use the resources of a state to make something happen. So it's big. It's a very big site, and it's a very important site. It is key to understand all the negotiations happened during a recession. They started in 2008, they ended in 2013. So guess what was happening at the same time? And so you may be frustrated thinking about the time that you spent, but please remember what was happening during that time. And it hit everybody, and it hit the national government, and it hit us too. So 6 years doesn't seem, or 6 or 7 years, depending on how you count it, is not a lot of time considering the magnitude and opportunities of this site. The second thing is regarding spending money, even if you have to buy them out, it will be less money today than it will be 20 years in the future. And if you think about that, of course you guys will be out of it because the urban renewal will be expired, but from the point of view of the city and the state, it's only going to get more expensive in time. And so there is some if you think about how things are building out around it, people will get that site, and they're going to get it more and more in the future. So if we're going to leverage it, we're going to leverage it for the public good, now's the time. And so we're just very supportive of this, and good luck with the negotiations, and well done with the scheme for the Broadway master plan. Really happy to see all the public involvement. So thanks.
Thank you very much to both of you. So I think it's motion time.
What generally is or have we discussed, or can we discuss, whether it's in small groups or in briefings, a general negotiating strategy for this piece of property?
Well, yeah, I think it's premature at this point, both because there's a lot of information that we don't have, and so that's partly why we need to go down this path, just like the post office needs to go down this path, so that we understand what the cost of a replacement facility could be. But I also think we need to give the Postal Service the opportunity to go through their own internal process as well, so that we're not so far out in front of them in whatever fashion, including discussing publicly our negotiating strategy. So I think other than the broad brush concept of us getting them into a replacement facility, I think beyond that, I do think we need to discuss it either offline or when we have more information. And so I will acknowledge that I think Patty probably did the best job. We could talk about this from a very big picture. This is the opportunity of a lifetime perspective, but we tried to have a very muted conversation today because it is so early, and we want to be very explicit about what we're asking for here, which is authorization to go forward to take this first step. We're excited about it. We obviously get that this is a big opportunity, but I don't want it to be that's like it's just pie in the sky. We need to take this very concrete step that involves spending money to get to a much better level of information and give the Postal Service a chance to move that much further along as well. And then you'll come back. You might get tired of this topic because we probably will come back multiple times, and there'll be time to talk about the opportunity and the vision. So the vision that was just presented to us is certainly one scenario for what this could be, but I think all of that it's going to play out in the framework planning process, but it's also premature for us to talk about that on the negotiating side as well.
Any other questions, commissioners? Chair will accept a motion from one of you.
I would make a motion to adopt resolution number 7105.
Sorry, I forgot how to do that. I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 We have ayes have it, and the motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, now we get to move on to a very
Need him for the
exciting budget amendment.
Do we need Charles for the budget?
Not that we're discounting the value of your,
Tony, do we need
Input.
Charles for the budget?
That's the only reason I got on the phone. Come on.
There you go.
I'm a
Tony's
budget
finally
guy.
getting the respect he deserves.
yep.
But I'm going to need to drop off in
Right.
about 15 minutes, so.
Okay.
Okay, so that's fine. I think we might have our missing commissioner is probably arrived. So when you're ready to drop off, Charles, you can just let us know.
Okay.
Thanks, Charles.
Yep.
Go ahead, Tony.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Kelly, Commissioners, Executive Director Quinton. I'm Tony Barnes, Budget Officer, and I'll be presenting quickly the budget revision number 2 for this fiscal year, the 14-15 fiscal year. It's our second budget revision, and perhaps our last as we get into the fourth quarter over the next few months of the fiscal year. And the core of this budget amendment is to adjust our expenditures and resources to match up to what we're forecasting will come in as revenues and what will go out the door in expenditures through June 30th of this fiscal year. So, quick overview, we're adjusting the revenues to reflect updated estimates based on the amount or timing of property sales, property management, loan collections, and TIF resources, now that we have all the property tax estimates in at the county. We're adjusting project and program expenditures based on updated estimates of year-end activity. This includes staff time, property development, property management expenses. We're also adjusting property development and loan programs based on updated estimates of year-end expenditures and to move funds into the 15-16 proposed budget. And then finally, we're adjusting the Portland Housing Bureau's set-aside budget based on the updated estimates they've provided us for expenditures through the end of this fiscal year. And a substantial portion of those dollars are going to be moved into the 15-16 proposed budget, the next topic I'll be talking about today, too. The main changes to the resources, this is again a roll-up of all of our funding sources across 25 different funds by what we call account categories. Between the last budget revision that I brought before you in the fall and the one that's before you today, the revised 2, there's changes among all the different accounts, but most notably in loan collections, property income are the 2 biggest. Loan collections, we're decreasing the estimate about $2.9 million. This is primarily related to the timing of some substantial repayments, things that we thought were going to come in by June 30th being pushed probably based on updated schedules to July and August. No change in whether or not the resources are coming in, just when the resources are coming in. And then property income, it's a timing of sales, mainly in the Oregon Convention Center URA, associated with properties that we had programmed into this year's budget. So our total revenue is forecast to decrease from $110 million, $110.6 million to $109.8 million in total. On the requirements side, our expenditures, this is where the most substantial true-up is, where we're decreasing the budget by, in total, about $103 million, $103.89 million. Most of these items were already recognized when we talked about the budget, the draft 15-16 budget during the January work session. We recognized that there were some substantial amounts, mainly in the Oregon Convention Center URA, as well as River District URA, a combination of commitments, for example, the health headquarters commitment to Multnomah County for $16.9 million, and items like the Veterans Memorial Coliseum and Convention Center Hotel that are programmed in Oregon Convention Center. Those dollars we moved into next year already as part of the draft budget for 15-16. So over half the $103 million is something that we already took into account, and this is codifying that change. There are some additional adjustments. For example, housing, there's a reduction of about $18.1 million. And the substantial portion of that adjustments in the Oregon Convention Center URA, about $12 million. Half of that's related to a project that's committed. It's a partnership project between Miracles Club and Central City Concern at 2nd and Wasco. That project is moving forward, but those dollars aren't anticipated to go out the door until next fiscal year. The balance of the project dollars are not committed at this time, but part of the set-aside, the final set-aside dollars for the Housing Bureau. So they'll be represented in next year's budget and 5-year forecast as well. The bulk of the $70 million is related to the projects I spoke of, the Multnomah County project, as well as the reservations of cash that we have in Oregon Convention Center, URA, which are programmed into next year. So a lot of this is cash on hand. And when we have cash on hand, what this does is increase what we call our contingency. So you can see our contingency is increased by $103 million. So that will be updated in our 15-16 proposed budget to represent our new beginning balance and cash that's reserved for projects or for opportunities. The final slide here just demonstrates the breakdown of expenditures between our prior version of the budget, the revised one, and the one before you today, the revised 2 budget. Total by business line, administration is going to be about $13.1 million as opposed to $13.3 for 12% of the budget. And then business development be about $15 million. The substantial change I didn't talk about in the previous slide with business development was the business lending program, where we moved the Daimler loan, $8 million, to next fiscal year based on when those funds would be drawn by that project. And housing will be about 22%, infrastructure 9%, property redevelopment 43%. That's adding up to the remaining dollars in this year's budget. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I want to point out there is an updated Exhibit A before you. We We had a last-minute change on Monday where we recognized a need to increase appropriations in the North Macadam Fund for a final payment related to the Central District DA in OHSU. That agreement's going to be finalized this fiscal year, so we wanted to make sure those dollars were recognized in this budget, and that's part of the Exhibit A now. That wasn't in last week's document.
First of all, thank you very much for pulling together. I'm glad you're doing that, not me. I guess I'd just like to express a little frustration. It's nothing towards staff, but having housing money sitting there, not having places to put it. When we've got homeless people out there, one of the things I'd like to see us try to do is to figure out ways to move that money out the door faster, so we can work with housing to get some stuff built and get those people housed. Thank you.
Commissioner Mullis?
I think that's a really good observation. But no, I don't have any specific questions. And thank you, Tony. You always, excuse me, really help us track the money and where it's going and where it's coming from and why it's moving and why it hasn't gone out the door. And it's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I was just going to ask, is this the last opportunity to make any amendments or adjustments to the budget?
This fiscal year, this was the last scheduled revision.
Okay.
We can adjust the budget. You can adjust the budget at any board meeting up through June 30th. So if there's any need for appropriations, we do manage budget and make changes on a project-by-project basis between these business lines, so we have some flexibility to make changes. But if dollars need to change within the categories at the fund level, we need to have a board action.
And I know that we've kind of, maybe it's been a year or two where you have various committees weighing in on the budget. How has that process been these last, I don't know, was it last year or the year before? Just as an update to, I know the neighborhood budget group is weighing in, and I read that they've had several meetings with the discussions in terms of the budget, as well as the central group. So I was just curious how that's going.
Sure, that's leading up to the development of the 15-16 budget. I'll touch upon some of those points in the next, presentation.
We have two back-to-back
Great,
budget
sorry.
items. So
I thought
this
you
is
were leaving.
this is us just amending the remainder of this fiscal year budget, ending June 30. So
Okay.
so the 15-16 budget Tony has next, and that is still open for discussion and changes. and
Okay,
whatnot.
perfect.
And this
Great.
is, as you can see, and as Commissioner Eden was lamenting, this is a lot of what happens at this point in the fiscal year with 3 months left, is moving stuff that we're not going to spend this year out of this year into next year, and so that we end with a budget that's close to it, and not because we're trying to hide differences in the process, that we didn't budget properly. It's just that it reduces the amount of cleanup that we have to do when we get into the next fiscal year. So that this is mainly cleanup for this year, and then we'll get into the 15-16 in a second.
Okay, thanks, Tony.
So Tony, after being on the commission for a little while, I think I'm sort of starting to understand all this. And I understand why things shift, and that makes sense to me. Are there items that shift from one year to the next, and then the next, and then the next?
Just carry over from year to year?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a few items over the last few years. A good example is post office and convention center hotel reservation of
I
funds.
guess maybe what I would like to see is that we just identify those so that it's really clearly called to our attention when they happen, if there's multiple year carryovers.
Yeah.
You may be already doing that, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I'll include that. It's part of our next budget update.
That'd be great.
Yeah, clear list.
All right, thank you. I think we need a motion to approve this. You haven't made any motions today.
So moved.
This is amending this budget. Yeah.
Do we have a motion? Second? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye, the ayes have it.
I didn't get to see the slides, but they sounded riveting, and I was following along, so as always, Tony, I appreciate your diligence.
So did I hear a vote?
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes, this is information.
Okay,
I'm dropping off right now, so sorry to have to leave you, but thanks very much.
thank you, Charles.
Take care.
Our next item, number 12, is work session on the Portland Development Commission's long-term financial sustainability.
You skipped one.
Oh, did I skip something?
11.
I'm sorry. Budget development update, item number 11.
Hello again, Tony Barnes.
Yeah.
So I'll provide a update of where we are with the 15-16 budget development. This is a good piece that comes right after the budget revision we just talked about. So I wanted to do a quick update on where we've been so far in this budget process and where we're headed from here. Some of the next steps, and illustrate some of the key points that we have, that we know of going into the budget, the version that's going to City Council in May. That's what the next version is going to be. So we drafted the budget back in November through December and January. We've met with the Central City and Neighborhood Budget Committee reviews 2 or 3 times, received input on the budget, and aligned priorities between the committee and then with the commission, with the board during the budget work session. So we had the work session and we submitted that budget to City Council on February 4th. And most recently, as was introduced at the beginning of today's meeting, we had a work session, a half-hour work session on March 30th on the 15-16 budget. Chair Kelly and Executive Director Quinton provided an overview of the budget. We went in depth on our general fund request, which includes a majority of ongoing dollars for economic development programs, but also $1.75 million in ad packages, new general fund money, one-time money for key programs for the Inclusive Startup Fund and the Community Development Fund that's being requested. That would be new money to the budget next year for those priorities. So there was a quick review of that with City Council last Monday. And going forward, the upcoming steps that we have, we're going to be reviewing today some of the main things we've identified that are going to the proposed budget with you. On approximately April 28th, we should have the mayor's proposed budget released. So the mayor's decisions on what would go forward in the city's budget. PDC then will finalize the proposed budget. So if those ad packages are recommended in the mayor's proposed budget, we'll continue to include those ad packages in our budget. And then we'll present our budget to City Council acting as the PDC Budget Committee on May 13th. There'll be a public hearing on the budget on May 20th, and then City Council's scheduled to vote to approve the budget on May 28th. Then it goes to the Tax Supervising Conservation Commission for review. I'll do another update on what happens with City Council, approved budget with you on June 10th, and then we'll be back here on June 24th. We'll have a TSCC tax supervising hearing on the budget, and you'll have a chance to make any final changes and adopt the budget. So that's the process moving forward. Any questions on the process? So a couple changes I want to highlight that we've recognized so far that's going in the next version. We're going to update the resources and expenditures based on what we just talked about, the 14-15 Rev 2 changes. Like I mentioned, the Multnomah County Health Headquarters, housing set-aside requirements, and then business lending, commercial lending programs where we know we have dollars that are both committed, but also opportunity funds that can move into next fiscal year or the 5-year forecast. Then there's a couple items we've been including more recently. We knew adjust the timing of the housing set-aside resources in North Macadam to be consistent with the North Macadam URA amendment. As part of the URA amendment process, most of the changes that were adopted by City Council last week were included in the draft budget, but one of the changes was moving $15 million into 15-16 for housing from later fiscal years. We identified that we have the financial capacity to do that, and so that would raise the total amount in for housing in North Macadam to $19 million in the 5-year forecast, mainly in the next couple of years. And then we'll also be adjusting commercial lending and other line items in the Lentz Town Center URA budget to support the latest programming for the action plan. We've gone through some initial analysis of what's required for the action plan and identified that there's money that we can move forward from the 5-year forecast, within the 5-year forecast, and we'll be increasing budgets. So attachment A in your report illustrates a revised North Macadam sources and uses, as well as a Lentz Town Center sources and uses 5-year plan. I'm just going to have 2 slides real quickly to demonstrate the change, the net change between what you saw in January and what we have right now is a draft proposed budget and forecast. So this is a 5-year total, not a 1-year total. So it's total change between one version to the next. So in North Macadam, you can see that we are increasing our tax increment draws by about $15 million to support the bringing forward of housing resources. And under housing expenditures, you can see that we have a total increase of around, a net increase in the 5-year plan of about $12.5 million for a total of 19.6. There's a few small adjustments to some of the infrastructure and property redevelopment line items. But in total, we're increasing the total expenditures by about $11.8 million in the 5-year forecast. That's what we've proposed so far, and that's consistent with the plan that was shared with City Council last week. The other big area, as I mentioned, is Lentz. In Lentz, the forecast you saw in January included all the resources by the end of the 5-year forecast. So the main thing here is that we're taking money that was programmed in contingency that wasn't programmed. You can see that as the $25 million at the bottom. It's coming out of contingency and being moved up in the forecast and being allocated to housing and property redevelopment under this proposed plan. So it's a net increase of expenditures of around $30 million to support the action plan, about $20 million in property redevelopment and $10 million in housing. And those are all, the $10 million is set aside resources. It's just programming those resources within the 5 years instead of sometimes after the 5 years. So that's, we'll have additional changes, mainly technical, over the next couple weeks, and we'll provide another update in June when we go through the City Council process. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on the process or what's planned.
Questions? Thank you, Tony. Looks like we're now going to move on to item number 12.
Thank you, Tony.
Peter, are you coming up for this? So we'll take a break after we get done with this. Does that sound good to everybody?
Chair Kelly. There we go. Chair Kelly, members of the Commission, Executive Director Quinton. I'm Peter Englander. I'm a manager here at the Portland Development Commission of the Opportunities Cooperative, and I am here with Tony Barnes, your financial budget officer, to talk about long-term financial sustainability. This was a topic that you touched on during your retreat and requested a more robust discussion, and that is today. After our presentation, we've allocated a fair bit of time for more discussion. We've known of the need to diversify our resources for a very, very long time. Our draft strategic direction now dictates an even more immediate need for diversification as tax increment is increasingly less able to solely accomplish our mission and our vision. The first thing we're going to do is provide for you an updated status quo analysis that Tony has performed. And so with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Peter. So what we'll show over the next few slides is a forecast at a couple different levels. we're running out of our ability to obtain new capital through tax increment resources, and we'll show a number of our districts will eventually go dark, meaning that we've spent all the money, but there will also be additional period to pay off all the debt in those areas over time. And so also, in addition to that, the tools become much more difficult to obtain, and that recommendations of new tax increment districts have been highly scrutinized in light of the financial impacts to overlapping taxing jurisdictions as well. So this first chart I'm illustrating here is our indebtedness by all of our URAs, both active and inactive, the ones that have issued all the debt. Illustrating this, we've issued a majority of the maximum indebtedness so far. That's the portion shown in black there. That amounts to, over time, it's amounted to about $1.4 billion in resources that we've issued. About $500 million of that remains outstanding. That's being paid off. And then the gray portion of each chart, each URA, represents what we think we can access over the remaining life of each URA. And then the white portion of the chart represents a portion we don't think at this time, based on our forecast, we can access, the remaining maximum indebtedness. So you can see that Airport Way was finished in 2008. Convention Center issued all the debt in 2012, 2013. Downtown Waterfront, 2008. And then River District, we think we can unlock, even with the URA amendment, all the maximum indebtedness. Interstate, almost all of it. But North Macadam with the URA amendment, a substantial portion. I made a note there, if there's additional development in the area, we think we can unlock all of the maximum indebtedness. And then Central East Side, we think we're going to unlock all the maximum indebtedness. This next chart demonstrates TIF resources and non-TIF resources over time that's currently in our business plan, our forecast. The blue line represents net tax increment proceeds. That's the new tax increment dollars that are forecast to come to PDC after the housing set aside, after you take off the 30% plus for housing set aside. So as you can see, by 22, 23, as districts start ending, this goes away. And then the red line represents non-TIF revenue. It's a combination of public funding from the City General Fund, but also resources that might be programmed income in URAs, such as interest on loans or property sales and other resources. So over time, this is pretty steady in our forecast right now. So this amounts to TIF. It's about $370 million in new TIF resources and about $440 million in non-TIF resources in the forecast. This next slide is kind of a bigger picture. This is all the resources available to PDC through 2030. So we've demonstrated this a couple different ways. So this important note here is it's not just TIF resources and non-TIF resources, it's also existing cash that we have on hand. And a lot of those dollars are already things we've talked about that are committed, things for Multnomah County, the projects in OCC and elsewhere, but it's everything. This amounts to about $1 billion in resources through 2030 in total. So if spent out evenly, this averages out to about $100 million per year until 2025. And if it spends out through 2030, it drops down to about $60 million per year. So a couple different ways of looking at the resource. The blue line is what we think will happen based on our current business plan, but it can move back and forth based on how fast things happen. So the next set of slides illustrates how new TIF resources, how drastically our resources are going away over the next 10 years throughout the city geographically. So as you can see, from now until 2020, we're expecting to issue a substantial amount of resources across most existing URAs. Some URAs, you can kind of see that are grayed out, still have debt that need to be paid off. So in the downtown, in the central city, we have OCC downtown waterfront South Park blocks that are grayed out. They still have debt. They'll be paid off by 2024, but there's spending that and new TIF resources in these orange-colored areas. This includes interstate lengths, NPI districts, everything else. So this amounts to about $380 million in resources through 2020. The next slide, you can see between 2020 and 2022, Lentz goes away. There's no new resources in Lentz. It ends. And finally, the last slide, between 2022 and 2025, all the URAs, with the exception of North Macadam, are done as far as issuing new resources. North Macadam, due to the URA amendment that was recently passed, would continue through 2025.
So that means that at that point, we are the North Macadam Development Commission. Basically what we are.
That's a vision.
So I'm going to drill down a little bit here to our operating budget. So we talked about total resources, and now I want to talk about our core programs and operating costs and the revenues that we use to fund that. So our operating budget is expected to grow over time, all things being equal, but the operating revenue, the blue line, is expected to be flat. So the staff and overhead is the green line. That consists of the 95 employees, positions we have at PDC, plus all the operating costs related to the agency, the rent, the systems, everything. Right now, that's about $14.5 million a year. The red line represents the staff and overhead plus or core economic development and workforce development programs. A lot of that's funded through the City of General Fund, federal grants, and other non-TIF resources. Some of it includes TIF funding. Of the operating revenue, $13 million is about half of that's public funding, general fund, public funding, as I mentioned. But half of it's from loan interest and net property income. So in the URAs, substantially, mainly we have a lot of interest from loans and property income that's helping fund the operations as well. So this blue line is a combination of public funding, but it's also based on our assets. So loan interest and property income. Really important point here is that the difference between our operating budget, the red line, and the blue line, that gap, is really TIF funding. It's new TIF resources or existing cash from TIF resources. And that's appropriate because a lot of our work is in URAs, so we allocate staff and operating costs to those URAs. Right now it's making up that difference, but over time as URAs go away, TIF declines, that's going to present more of a problem. I want to touch, we talked about TIF briefly. I want to talk quickly about non-cash assets that help generate resources for both projects, but also the operating budget. That blue line, the portion of the blue line for loan interest and property income. This slide illustrates on the top our loan portfolio. We have 190 outstanding loans as of March 31st, a balance of $64 million, but on our books, our balance after our loan allowance, about $47 million. So it's discounted based on expected repayment. This is based on the high risk of a lot of loans and the mission-driven nature of PDC's lending activity. It's substantially less than what the portfolio balance is. And then the property value, we have on our books for annual financial reports, $72 million actually as of March 31st across the different URAs. In our business model, in the $1 billion I talked about for resources, we are estimating right now about $40.5 million. So this could change based on sales, proceeds, what actually comes in, and what happens with different assets in these different URAs. So it illustrates what we have on our books, but also what we're forecasting. So in summary, TIF is not the answer. There's a lot of high assessed value land within URAs with long-term debt, meaning that it's going to take a while for these URAs to pay off the debt and That's where the value is, where the increment's been created. It's going to take a while for debts to be paid off. As we talked about, the political climate for new districts is challenging, local and statewide. And there's a long duration for meaningful financial growth, meaning that new districts won't materially change the resource picture for another 15 or 20 years. It takes a long time, in many cases, for TIF to ramp up when you start a new district. And then finally, our draft strategic plan calls for resources that are more flexible than TIF. We need to look at other opportunities. And one example is our request of the City Council for the $1.75 million for those new programs to augment what we have. So that completes that portion of the presentation. I'm going to hand it back to Peter.
So just a question about that. Are we making an assumption that, it says TIF is not the answer, are we making the assumption that we won't ever expand into a new urban renewal district?
I don't think so. I think it's not the answer in this 15-year period that we're looking at, or 20-year period, where there's a payoff period with existing districts, and it's going to take a while.
Part of the outcome of our sustainability study could be that we recommend the establishment of new URAs that would provide a funding stream 15, 20 years from now.
Yeah.
Is that right?
And part of the value of the map is that it shows you that even when we're done spending in particular urban renewal areas, there's still this period of what we like to refer to as going dark until we have significant acreage and or assessed value to apply towards new urban renewal areas. So, you know, we've been bumping up against the ceilings for a very, very long time. And with the recent reductions, we've definitely got more room. But as Tony was describing, 2024 is when a number of those districts are going to completely pay off, and that's going to release especially a great deal of assessed value, because most of those districts are downtown districts that are small in acreage but large in assessed value, and you're constantly have to playing with both. And to your point, Chair Kelly, by 2030, we're done, and we're back down to zero in both assessed value. And so I think it's really more a sense of it's not the only answer. It doesn't preclude it being part of the answer, but I think we're illustrating that we've certainly had some challenges in the creation of new districts over the last 5 to 8 years, for sure. Obviously, we created a whole bunch at the beginning of this decade, so it's ebbed and flowed.
Peter, if you go back just to the last slide with, go back to the next one, go to the next slide.
This one.
Yeah, so all those districts in gray, that's still 2025. You can't start new urban renewal over those gray areas. And basically, that's all the high assessed value part of the city. Now, you could go to other parts of the city. Obviously, there's a lot of the city still left there, but those are all lower assessed value areas, or areas that aren't, there's areas where we'd want to operate in areas that don't really need our work, but you really do have this period of not just going dark with TIF, but you could go dark with the agency if you're waiting for TIF to solve the next problem.
Right.
We're past that point. We're past the point where TIF will bridge us through this period.
Is there a period of time the states we cannot go back into those areas and create new TIF? For example, in the River District, once it sunsets, is there a 20-year?
No, it's just you have to pay off the debt. Once the debt's paid off, then you it's just return to the tax rolls, and then it's just
Start
like,
the clock.
right.
And then you also have a higher frozen base, too, Commissioner. So, when Tony was mentioning the ramp-up period, it's harder to do that.
So 2 questions, if I can, Tony. The set-aside for affordable housing, same implication for it.
Absolutely.
It's going to go away. And the set-aside for housing that comes out of this, do we have a notion as to what % of the funding resources it is for affordable housing produced in the city by PHB at this point in time?
I gotta get back to you with a specific percentage. There is federal funds as well as some city general funding. I don't want to throw out a figure right now, but
I'd be interested to know that, and I suspect it's a major portion of the gap.
it is.
Yeah, that would be good to know because of the impact on it. The second question I have is on, I guess they aren't numbered, but on the one where you show current PDC non-cash assets. just looking down on it, and March 31 property held for sale value, I see North Macadam, and I see on the book value side, we're showing 6.5 million, and on the proceeds and business model, I see a 0. And I am guessing maybe that is the parcel that we're discussing doing affordable housing on.
Right, we're not assuming that sale value in our budget right
So in
now.
that business model, or in that model, in addition to the set-aside, we're contributing PDC resources towards affordable housing, in addition to the set-aside.
But, yeah, I don't think that's been determined yet, so.
In this
So
model,
so for the purpose of the model, which was done purely for modeling purposes, for cash flow purposes, you know, a few years back, we started working on this, and I wanted a cash-in, cash-out model, so that it wasn't, right? And so we made assumptions about what we expected to get back on different properties, and so that's the assumption there. So there could be conservative on the proceeds, the business model side of the table. And this is in here less about to paint a negative picture and say, oh my God, it's actually to say, here's assets we're working with. Since as Peter will get into next, how other agencies have handled this, that these assets actually become really important. So to the extent that we can make this 40 million in proceeds double or triple, that's obviously, right, that could be one aim of our business plan.
Any other questions before we keep going?
There's just one other
Yeah,
comment
go
on
ahead.
that, and that's that finding that balance between mission and a future.
Right. No, that's it. That's exactly it. And I think we're trying to paint a somewhat realistic picture based on how we operate today. And the real question, and what I'm going to go into next, is how we might think about operating differently and what directions we might go. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, we've known this for a long time. 3 years ago, staff did some research on other organizations that we consider have similar abilities, have similar stature, and I think the biggest telling note of that was that they have more diverse resources. They aren't completely or solely reliable on one resources, and we have a slide that shows that. What I've got up there right now is a list of some of the best practices that were learned in this work that was done in 2012, and executive director was part of this work as well. And I think some of the biggest takeaways from that is that some of these other agencies use extensive use of fees for services, that they get paid for some of the services that they provide. And I think we feel that there's a lot of services that we provide for free, and we're no longer able to afford to do that. And these are services of value, and so that's one major area. They also leverage or take advantage of their assets for a greater return to accomplish their mission through a number of methods that include leasing, parking garages, their loan portfolio. So just as Commissioner Edlin, you were asking about our current portfolio, I mean, we can think about the resources that we have in the bank, the resources we're going to be able to obtain that Tony went through over the next number of years, and the assets we have, including our current loan portfolio and our current real estate portfolio, and how we might treat those a little bit differently. These other organizations also have deeper relationships with philanthropic foundations. So that's something that we've learned, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that more later. And they're multi-organizational, which is a word I think I made up, but they're not just one thing. They're not just a chartered redevelopment agency. They have nonprofit arms. They have community development entities so that they can obtain new market tax credits. I just learned recently that one of our brethren agencies became a community development financial institution. So that enables them to have access to different resources from the U.S. Treasury that we currently can't access. All of this is done with missions that are very, very similar to ours. So it's a trend that we saw in a number of the agencies. And to the point that I believe you just made, Chair Kelly, they cross-subsidize. So there are things that they do to make money, and there are things that they do to spend more on their mission that really cost. But that's a balance. It is a real balance that has to be considered, but that's what they've done. And so in this slide, you can see these different agencies. Here's Boston, Detroit, the New York City Economic Development Corporation, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis, and none of them have as much of a singular reliance on public, and this is public resources. This isn't even just tax increment. These are all public resources, and you can see these are old numbers from 3 years ago, but I suspect that the percentage of public resources that we rely upon are pretty similar today than they were 3 years ago at 89%, and the next closest one was 70%, and you see some at 0. So you can see the range of how these other organizations work. And even though some of these organizations may be from larger cities, you know, we have a lot of notoriety for what we do. And so I don't think it's unfair to compare us to a New York agency or a Philadelphia agency because of the work that we've done for over 55 years. So I think it's a fair comparison to make and give us a better sense of how we might think about moving forward. And certainly want to remind you, and I know you're getting an update later today.
Peter?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go back to the last one, if you would, please.
Yes, this one.
If you could provide some kind of breakdown for well, probably for all of them and where they get their money, but especially the ones that have high percentages of other resources.
Yeah.
You know, where are they getting those income streams from? I think that'd be really good information to have.
Yeah, and which of those have gone through a transition like we're going to need to do away from TIF? Is that true of all of them or some of them, or?
You know, that's a very good question, Chair. I don't know whether they necessarily started one way and went to another. I don't believe that these agencies necessarily started in the same place we're starting. But the question is very relevant. You know, have they gone through a transition? What's their evolution been like, and how's that similar or different from what we're looking at today?
So just at a high level, I don't know if you want to just take a crack at it, and Peter's going to go through some different revenue opportunities, but for the most part, the agencies that are relying on other public resources have some combination of, they get fee for service for whatever. It could be transaction fees, could be fees for actual services they provide. They manage assets that generate some kind of return, whether it be they own real estate and can get lease income. They run parking, but they have some kind of return on their assets. Some of them are, as Peter mentioned, they're engaged in their community development entity for new market tax credits, so they earn fees from those transactions. You know, some of them, if they're in the lending business, they're generating more interest income on their loan portfolio than we are. So it's a collection of it, and so if you look at, and so if you combine that with one of the other best practices, which is that they almost all have 3 to 4 main revenue streams as opposed to one. So it's not just one answer. Now, some of this is deceptive just because what we're looking at here is from an operating perspective, and so we were trying to compare apples to apples, and we're more of a capital agency when you look at our budget. One of the exercises that we've been engaged in over the past few years is to track the operating side of our organization as opposed to the money that goes in. So this is just looking at the operating budget. So New York, for example, it's a little deceiving. They are a completely self-sufficient organization based on revenues they generate, and it's really return on their real estate portfolio. But the capital side of their business is funded by the city. So if the city wants a particular redevelopment project to happen, then they'll put up the money, and then they expect NYCEDC to go and manage that project and do it on their own. And then they have this completely symbiotic relationship in which any return that the agency earns on anything in a year over a certain dollar amount goes back. The city has the right to take it back, so that the city recaptures all this extra income. And so if they have a big windfall from a property sale in 1 year, the city will take that money back, and then they'll reappropriate it out, and then some for projects. So they have almost the opposite model that we do, which is we fund the capital side of things and go ask for some operating support. And in New York, they take care of their operations, and the city funds on the capital side. But so setting that aside, they are a self-sustaining operations and have lots of lessons for us to learn in addition to these other ones. Does that that help in that?
Yeah, I just want to mention that a number of years ago, when Patrick came back from one of these visits to these organizations, he said, let's start some new programs because this is how I see these other agencies obtaining resources. So that's why we have an EB5 partnership program. Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation has a strong partnership program. They've had it for years. And on one hand, they've seen a lot of development using that capital source that doesn't hit their balance sheet, like Executive Director Quinton was just stating, but they make a fee off of that partnership arrangement, and we've attempted to do the same kind of thing.
Peter, a couple comments or questions, if I may. One is the ones that went through transition, how long did it take?
Yeah.
One of the concerns I think we ought to have out in front of us is, you know, we're talking about slow growth. It kind of reminds me of your discussion about TIF. It doesn't happen overnight. And given the end of the ramp that we're facing, when do we have to put something in action to avoid falling off the end of that ramp? Kind of the second one is one of the pieces you touched on was philanthropy.
Yeah.
I notice all these cities, our ancestors came from there and founded this town. We don't have a Rockefeller Foundation such as Cleveland has.
Yeah, that's true.
I can only imagine the size of the assets. I've heard people criticize the philanthropic community here in Portland, and I think it's outstanding. Yet it is not New York, and it's not Pittsburgh or these other cities. And I think we've got to look at that with a realistic eye.
Yes.
Because we don't have it.
I'm sorry.
I'd also be interested to know which of these cities has a strong mayor system. I know in Boston, the mayor's king. And when Menino was there and he said, turn right, everybody turned right. So what impact does that have on executing on something like this? And the last one I would have is interested to know which one of these has housing underneath them in terms of affordable housing as you go down the road with your work going forward. Thanks.
Okay, I think I got them all. I'll make sure.
I'm around.
Thank you. And there are a few of these questions I think I'll answer a little bit. I'll start to answer some of them in the next slide or two. But with respect to some of your first questions, I think this is why we're wanting to make sure we have this discussion today, because we think we do need to start this. So even though we're looking at substantial resources, are they the right resources, and should we start doing some different things with those resources than we're currently doing? And I'll just bring up this slide very, very quickly because you're going to talk about it a little bit later this afternoon. But this is our new strategic plan, and I think this is one of the really driving forces for, regardless of the tax increment that we're going to be able to raise over the next number of years, we have a new strategic direction, or we've been evolving into a new strategic direction that certainly continues to emphasize the importance of physical improvements to real estate, but it's less important than it used to be. And so with this resource that we have that is very restricted in its use, our new strategic direction is really looking for us to obtain and access for the work that we're doing a different kind of capital, a different kind of resource. So I'm going to move on from this slide because you're going to hear more about this, but I'll just emphasize the fifth point, and this equity, innovation, and financial sustainability. I've truncated what it says in the strategic plan, but that's what we're supposed to be. That's the agency is supposed to have some financial sustainability so that we can continue to work on the other objectives here. So here I want to go through a little bit, spend a little bit of time talking about the kinds of things that we either know are opportunities, and we've started to dabble in them, dip our toe in the water, and I'll give you some examples in each one of these. And we've talked about this already a little bit. From lending practices, a great example of that is how the PNCA loan was structured, more of a market rate loan, less than a below market rate loan. In the real estate owned disposition practices, we've looked at and we've You all have approved dispositions of real estate at market rates and trying to obtain the highest rate. So we're putting out requests for offers, working with brokers, all things to really obtain the highest value for a piece of real estate is another example of what we've done there. Mission-oriented funds, we've started doing some things there. As you're well aware, the Portland Seed Fund was a mission-oriented fund. For that, we indeed created a separate entity to do that. So that's an example of how we might need to continue to look at where that entity can help us do things that we can't necessarily do as a city chartered agency. To your point, Commissioner Edlin, we have started partnering more with foundations, both locally, but we were also one of 15 development finance agencies nationwide that were invited to discuss more direct investments from national foundations. So these aren't necessarily local ones, but ones that want to take their program-related investment and their mission-related investment. One of those is where they want to obtain a normal market return, but want it still to be invested in something that meets their mission. And the other is where they want their money back, but they're willing to accept a lower return. And in both of those situations, these national foundations were really not very aware about development finance agencies and what we did, and how we invest in job creation, how we invest in infrastructure, all things that meet their mission. And they had been working through other channels and were really thrilled to know and understand how the development finance agency world works. And this was a first discussion of that at the national level. So I think your point is extremely valid locally. And as you know, I was on that trip in Cleveland, and I'm from Cleveland, and I'm very aware of the deep foundational support that is there that we're just not going to have here. But it was really exciting to see the national interest in the work that development finance agencies like us do. We've been developing a property assessed program. We talked about that at the retreat a little bit. So that's another tool that we've started to use. We've been working on this program for quite some time and hope to roll it out this calendar year. We're going to start with some pilot projects to see how it works, but this would be a production model. This would be where we would really ramp up and need to have a lot of volume to make this work, not only to accomplish its mission, but also to obtain a financial return for it. We've been making contact with private equity firms and sovereign wealth firms from outside our country's borders. And this has been fascinating. Our ability as a government agency to be able to provide a level of understanding to sovereign wealth funds or other private equity that may not necessarily be particularly knowledgeable about a secondary market like Portland. We are a leader in so many ways that we are getting on radar screens for this type of investment. And we believe that this is the type of investment we really haven't seen in Portland. I think we've definitely seen an increase in institutional, domestic institutional investment. But now that we're getting much more international notoriety, this is something that we see as a real opportunity. And in fact, the request for qualifications or the request for proposal that just went out in University Place at Portland State University, we've been talking to international money who might be interested in that type of investment because of the scale. And we have scale type opportunities that are now available to us in a number of locations. So that's an opportunity that we've started to look at. We've talked about in a fair amount of in-depth, well, let me go to the service and transaction fees. So here's another area where I think there are situations where we've given our services away for free, and we've started to now get remunerated for some of those services. I mean, there are little ones like providing videos and the convening that we do, but there are other opportunities when we're talking to foreign direct investment. I mean, that's a big opportunity. Other investment that's coming into our city that needs to learn the Portland way, which is pretty unique. And we know quite a bit about that. And what's unique about us is that we have that perspective not only of the private market, but also the public policy. And that's unique to us. I really don't believe the broader community has the in-depth knowledge and understanding about how to get things done in things like understanding our planning regimen, things like how our system development charges work, how we can negotiate those types of things. I think these are services that we can provide that have value. And as I mentioned, other cities like us, other agencies like us have obtained those kinds of fees for those services. And then real estate development operations, not only changing what we do based on our lending practices and our disposition practices, but is there real estate development we should be doing more? And one of the most robust topics, I think, has been parking garages. And here's a situation where we might provide a service to the community because parking's very expensive and it's inefficient for every single building having to provide its own parking. And can we have a new standard in Portland where the public invests in this way in ways that we might uniquely be able to do that the private sector can't? And in doing that, providing a service, making the cost of the development less expensive in our city, also providing us with a revenue stream. That just gives you an example. And the last two I just wanted to put on there, we've talked about them, but these are other kinds of entities that we've seen other agencies go ahead and set up for themselves, both community development entities, and that is the type of entity that is able to apply for and obtain new market tax credits. We were at the forefront of that market 14 years ago. We were, Portland and this agency spawned another organization, and we were some of the earlier winners of substantial new market tax credits, and we have some incredible projects that we were able to accomplish because of that. We no longer have that capability. And we can't be a community development entity as the Portland Development Commission. We would have to create a separate sort of entity because government agencies are not allowed to obtain new market tax credits directly. But that doesn't mean we can't do something like we did before, like Philadelphia has done and other cities have done. And then a community development financial institution. I've already mentioned that, but here's another area. These are organizations in our city, some of them very well known, Craft 3, Albina Community Bank. These are community development financial institutions, and they have access to resources we don't have access to right now. And it's not meant to compete with them. It's meant to bring more resources to Portland and to the kind of stuff that we all want to accomplish. So that really is all we wanted to present to you. And Chair Kelly, I look to you for how you want to carry on this discussion. We put up a number of questions here we thought could be relevant in the discussion, but I look to you for how you would like to proceed.
So this question page, do we have that up
on the slide?
We do now.
Oh, it's not, oh, here we go.
So I think that's the way for us to start talking about this, is to just go through those questions. You know, how should staff proceed in developing a new business plan for the agency? And, you know, my perspective is that this is the most important discussion we could possibly have during the tenure that all of us are on the commission, that maybe we're a few years behind in really addressing this, and that we really need to diligently work towards coming up with a new plan that's the real long-term plan for this agency. And I guess I also have the perspective that some of these things that we're talking about, including in a plan, we may want to move quicker than waiting until the end of the plan process.
Yeah.
You know, certainly things like fee for service, just going forward with the, you know, implementing into the organization the culture that when we think there's some place where we can get a fee for service, let's do it. You know, certainly continuing to look to, you know, for more projects like the convention center parking garage as time goes on, and not wait until we develop a plan to start to talk about those, and or moving forward with that plan. But, you know, going back to developing the plan, I think that what we've talked about is getting basically something like that we had in the strategic plan committee, where we bring in maybe some members of this commission and then some outside citizen input, and we move forward. That seems to me that what we should just get moving on.
Yeah.
And I assume we need a budget for that. We should establish what that might be and get going with it. I do think we need to start having the discussion with, you know, with city council about what is there any future for, at the same time, for new urban renewal districts that we should be talking about now so that we can be, you know, having that impact 15, 20 years out. I would hate to see us just not address that issue, at least. Other commissioners, thoughts, input? You know what?
It feels like a huge task. And I feel like, I don't know, Commissioner Moles has been here longer, so he probably has a little more experience in this arena, but I know that we address some of these conversations, I feel like, for quite a few years now, and how we get to that next point continues to always be the challenge. Yeah. And in terms of like the fees, I mean, changing the culture of what people are used to, I personally find that to be the most daunting task of this whole process, because, you know, everyone has an idea. I mean, we've kind of had to go through some changes as an agency as it was, and to really dramatically change that, that's to me going to be the biggest kind of areas that we're going to have to address, like in terms of, you know, paying for fees and services. I mean, I think of even my own industry, we do so much for free, and customers are just used to that, and changing the culture and the dynamics of an industry is really difficult. So, I don't know, it feels like a lot.
Commissioner Dixon, if it's okay, I'd like to comment on both the points that you make. I think it's an important aspect of all of that, not only changing the, and I think you were probably speaking to the, not only culture within these four walls, but outside these four walls.
Exactly.
And so one of the things that I've done in this position is start to have those discussions out there in the community. The first question you ask is, the first question I have asked is, do you find this agency valuable? Is it valuable for us to be around? Well, if it is, you know, and I think the important point is it valuable? Why is it valuable? I'm sorry. And if it is, then how are we going to operate differently, because we're in a situation where we're not able to continue to rely on this? So I think what I've certainly really appreciated about this is that it needs to be a public discussion. I think we need to, on one hand, acknowledge the fact that we are not going to continue to rely on this one tool, and I think there'll be a lot of appreciation for that from some folks in our community, and the other folks who've been able to utilize it for all these years are going to be disappointed, but I think they're going to very much understand and appreciate the value that we do bring to the city, but we do need to engage them in that conversation for sure.
Well, I think Chair Kelly's idea of having some sort of organized group that's charged with working on this and a timetable is probably a really good idea. I would really echo exactly what you just said, and that was a thought that I had. I mean, for so long, this agency has been we're going to help you fill in the gaps, whether it's, you know, lower, you know, below market interest rates, you know, donating land, you know, help filling in, and to flip that on its head, I think is probably one of the more difficult options that we have up there. I think if we can get a good analysis of what some other cities do successfully for us to take a look at and consider, I think that would be really, really helpful. I think one example of how we started to do things smarter around here is Greater Portland, Inc. You know, rather than, you know, all the different economic development agencies and business recruitment entities for every city and county in the area working independently and sort of sometimes working together every once in a while, which was the case 5-10 years ago, to having a pretty united, coordinated effort that's where we got to go, obviously. Somebody that's spending a lot of time in Salem right now, I mean, there's not a lot of extra money laying around any place that I know of. So IDing new sources of money is going to be tough. We're going to have to get creative. 3 years ago, my wife and I had the good fortune to go to Boston. I think it was either after you had just been there or folks from Boston had been out here.
Scott and I were there, yeah.
And I spent an hour at the Boston Redevelopment Agency. I was quite astonished when my wife chose to go to Quincy Marketplace instead of spending an hour of vacation drilling into urban renewal policy. But one of the things that I think they told me they did was for housing projects that they help develop, not rentals, but condo style stuff. It was sold either the first time or was it every time?
First time, it was like a transfer tax.
Yeah, and it was a relatively small fee, and everybody just knew that was a part of it, but it generated a nice income stream for that agency. So I think those are some of the things that we're going to have to keep an eye out for and see if we can, if those make sense for Portland.
Seems like every time we look at a project, we need to be asking the question, is there some way for back-end funding to come out of that project? So when we subsidize, probably a bad example, but a store on MLK, 20 years from now, can we be getting some small portion of the income from that project after it's been paid off and so on? And we're doing that a little bit, aren't we?
We're starting to do it on a more kind of regular basis, yeah.
And those are the kinds of things I think we should just start doing immediately. At least considering it every time there's a new project.
So a couple of thoughts, I guess. One is, I think as you look at the other cities, sort through what they're doing and how they're doing it, which ones may be applicable to Portland, which ones may not, for various reasons, whether it's the nature of how our city council is built or whether it's the philanthropic community and the size of it here, or other items like that. I guess the second thing I would, first of all, I think you ought to go forward. I think you ought to go forward as fast as you can. Because this stuff, it just takes a long time to build value and wealth out of it, to be able to reinvest it towards the mission, I think. The second point I would have is I think looking at public-private partnerships is really valuable. I think the public side can do a lot of things the private can and vice versa, and together they can do some really cool things. In particular, I think the rigor that the private side can bring to projects around, what's market realities and how to do it most cost effectively, I think can be very valuable. As the newest person on this commission, and only having been here for 5 or 6 months, and looking at a couple projects that have come down the pipe, in particular the Centennial Mills and the discussion around that, and just sitting here thinking about the amount of value that you're creating in that property. And to tag on to Tom's comment about, while maybe the first 10 years there's nothing there, because to get it off the ground and make it happen, that's what we have to do. But that property is going to be there for 100 years or more. And if we can back end it and come up with creative ways to do that, that still allows the private side to make fair rates of return and will attract capital, both debt and equity to those projects, it strikes me that that's something that could create significant value and capital for this organization going forward. I guess the last thing, one thing that wasn't really touched on, but I think it was kind of buried down there a little bit. Being out there in the business community every day, I've got some right-wing friends that would ask the question, do we need a PDC? And I think we need to be responsive to that if we're going to go out there and evaluate this in honesty and transparency. And I don't know how we kind of surface that question.
Invite all those friends of yours to a meeting.
That's right. And I think likewise, I've expressed frustration earlier today and in other meetings about, we've got housing money sitting here and we're rolling it forward to next year's budget. And I wonder if this agency shouldn't have a bigger role in affordable housing, and if that's maybe not part of that puzzle as well. And the last thing that, I guess I said one more thing and I lied, You know, I watched the current debate around parks, and I'm a big supporter of parks. I voted for every bond measure. And now we've got another SDC that's going to be in front of City Council very soon. And I haven't heard a conversation about, is that the right place for those dollars to go? Should that SDC go towards affordable housing? Should it go towards PDC? You know, our community, we've got limited dollars. And I think there's a broader discussion that could occur that this could be part of. So, appreciate your effort, and I would encourage you to move quick.
It does seem like, you know, we can say, well, there's those big foundations back east. But there's some significant amount of money in local foundations too. And, you know, that if we could put together a application to, you know, a whole combination of local foundations where we would apply to them to get a loan fund that would be a revolving loan fund that we would administer. I don't think those kinds of things are impossible. There's going to be some new foundations that come into play in the next several years because of the passing of some of our, you know, more significant businesses in our region, and there's going to be new sources of funding that we may not even you know, see right now, but that could be pretty significant, and we should be ready for that. Just seems to me.
Another comment I'd like to add that I think is really important is that we do not lose sight of our mission and what we've been about as an agency, which has been to help the public all along, and especially in terms of my community, people of color. I think that's a big focus on this new strategic plan that we're implementing, and not to lose sight of that, because sometimes I think that can happen, and then the agency starts to not be as relevant.
I know this is probably not a smart idea, but I'm bringing it up anyway because I thought of it last night, and that is there some way for us to create an urban renewal kind of financing that is just focused on housing? And when I say not just necessarily quote unquote affordable housing that's multifamily, but to help neighborhoods. You know, when I think of East Portland especially, we need to be thinking about new innovative ways to finance the basic things that they don't have, sidewalks and, you know, quote unquote, walkable communities and paved streets even. So, you know, I think we have to try to be innovative and come up with new ways of funding that sort of thing so we can have a complete city in all parts of it. That was part of what I told the city commission my dad would be saying now about where the city's at. So you guys getting enough direction from us?
Certainly. I want to make sure you're having enough opportunity to discuss the various things that you want to discuss. I think when I look down the list of questions, I don't see anything we haven't necessarily addressed. Executive Director, do you have anything else you want to make sure we discuss?
No, I mean, I think like you said, Peter, they've touched on most of them. I guess I'd be curious maybe to get a more explicit answer to the last question. I know Peter is, and that's, are there revenue opportunities that we should pursue that aren't core to our mission? That's one of the tensions in this, is you can have redevelopment projects and you can, you know, try and get the same outcomes, but maybe have some kind of deferred return, whatever, but you're still basically working towards your mission. But there's also opportunities that come to us that really don't advance the mission, but could represent revenue opportunities. And that's always a tricky one, because even we could all agree, yeah, that makes sense, because but you know, externally, people have a hard time understanding why PDC is involved in certain activities. Are we displacing private activity that would otherwise do that, right? But
I think trying to bring everything to the table for a discussion. I mean, this
Absolutely.
seems like the time to do it. It's the notion there are no stupid questions or no stupid ideas, and you know, maybe we'll take one of those gems and turn it into something else, and you come up with something that's great, and some of them will just cast by the wayside probably.
Yeah, we would want to be careful not to just go into direct competition with some industry, I think, but, I mean, that happens in our state right now. I mean, we've had a cabinet operation in the state prison for years, and, you know, I'm in the cabinet business, and it bugs me a little bit, but at the same time, I think it's great to be rehabilitating those prisoners and finding them skills. So, you know, you just have to balance that stuff and say, hey, is this good for the overall community? It seems like, to me, like it's, the question is answered by revenue opportunities that at least have some alignment with our mission. And I think most of the time that would be fairly obvious.
Yeah, and certainly the revenue opportunities we're talking about are, you know, certainly in alignment with what we already do, so we wouldn't get into a new line of business. We would not get into the cabinet making business, right? So it would be. You know,
I needed to bring on a record, so you didn't do that. Yeah.
So, but yeah, so we, you know, we stand in a lot of deal flow, do lending. You know, there's things we do that if you just took one step to the side, you're squarely just doing it for revenue. And I think those are moments where we do, you know, wonder whether or not there's going to be some kind of pushback if we do that. And you know, lending in particular is an area where you can look across the spectrum and say, our loan portfolio could be a lot more profitable if we would just be in this part of the market, right? But then that puts us, you know, squarely in the market with others. So those are, you know, so we can certainly bring those to you and get your feedback on that. The question about current business practices, I mean, I think we have fairly good guidance from you now, but what may come of that is us coming to you real time and saying, here's a deal. And normally we would have sold the property this way and said we're doing it this way, or we'd have structured the deal this way, and so that if we're going to do that without having to wait for a business plan, that's how it's going to come about. It's going to come to you as a change in the way we typically do business, and we'll be, you know, sure to highlight it as that, so it's not just kind of a random change. So, but I know we have on the next slide, Peter has just a timeline. I think we will go forth, create some kind of a committee, and we can come back to the board with something that looks like a business plan or recommendations for how the business model might look going forward. But, you know, certainly by the end of this calendar year, but with the direction to go forward now on things that we can do right away.
Just thinking about that question that somebody raised, you know, which is, does the community want PDC? I think we need to figure out a way how to go forward with addressing that in a forthright way.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I want to think the answer is yes, but I think we need to ask the question.
Well, you know, there's two questions that we're trying to answer. I don't think you can ultimately separate them, but some people might. But the recent, you know, TIF's running out. Which means that it's running out for projects. Forget PDC. So all the projects that have gotten done over the years that require TIF. So I mean, you can say that's the problem we're trying to solve. How do we replace this source of funding that's made all these things happen? And then, as Tony mentioned, with this operating gap, along the way, if TIF runs out, then you really don't have a way to fund the operations as we currently know them. And so you know, what's the solution to that? And then, you know, I think the case we need to make is you need a PDC to be able to do all the things that people actually like. You know, it's one of these things where if we go out to the public and say, do you like storefront program? Do you like DOS? Do you like, everyone says yes. Do you like PDC? Nah, right? So you have to all along the way say, this is what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to continue to do these programs or accomplish the strategic plan, and along the way, you need to make sure you have an operating entity that's in place to do these things. And I think that's what we have to do as part of this business plan. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Challenging but exciting too, right?
Yes. Yes.
Move on to the next agenda item?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good presentation.
Everybody still going strong here,
Shall we take a 5-minute break? Let's keep moving. Our next one is action item 13, authorizing a purchase and sale agreement to convey 0.8 of an acre of real property in the River District Urban Renewal Area to Williams Dane Associates for $7.4 million. Resolution 7107.
Hello again. Before I start with this item, I just want to say, Chair Kelly, that 8L is fenced and under construction, and that's our first crane for Old Town Chinatown of the 2 requested.
Yay for cranes.
Be the 4th one in our portfolio since the December request by the mayor, so that's very exciting. Anyway, today we are here to request approval of Resolution 7107 with our partner William Dames and Associate, with the result being to sell the PDC-owned property for the development of a mixed-use office building with a retail ground. You can see the site highlighted in red. So this just shows the amount of acreage. There's about just 0.8 acres of land, and you can see kind of how it's bordered. And do note that there is a DEQ remedial action plan that is a part of this particular parcel. Here's a rendering of the proposed office building. Activates that corner brilliantly as a northern gateway to the Pearl. So a little history of this transaction. In June of 2014, PDC received an unsolicited offer from the developer to purchase the property and develop an office building with a ground floor retail component. The proposal also contained an associated 40-year lease of 99 parking stalls in the nearby PDC-owned Station Place garage. The lease rates would be equivalent to that charged to the public. In July of 2014, PDC posted a public notice of intent to sell the property. Having received no further objections to the proposed disposition, PDC elected to move forward with the direct negotiations of a purchase and sale agreement. 2 appraisals were obtained, one for highest and best use, which was multifamily residential, and it was adjusted to a price of $6.9 million. The other appraisal was for an office building with a retail component with a price of $4.1 million. Please note that the original offer was $5.4 million for an office building, so it was less than the highest and best use, but it was higher than the existing appraisal for an office. Given the increase in activity in the market, the CBD, or Central Business District, statistics state that office increase in demand was up 9 out of the last 10 quarters. And to ensure competitiveness of the developer's proposed acquisition price, PDC decided to list the property with a broker for 30 days to solicit additional offers. The marketing materials made clear that the responses were restricted to the development of an office with a retail component on the ground level, and that the developer would have the opportunity to match the highest and best offer received going forward. PDC received 6 offers, 3 of residential and 3 for office. Brokers then asked for the highest and best offers for the office proposal. Staff reviewed, and Trammell Crow was selected. PDC provided the developer the opportunity to match this offer. This offer was $7.4 million. The developer went forward and accepted the counter, and it's the following terms and conditions. Purchase price of $7.4 million with a $200,000 earnest money payment. Market rent for the parking spaces I indicated prior, and a 3% transactional cost to PDC. This 3% brokerage fee covers the cost of the broker, as well as a 1% breakup fee with Trammell Crow for not having the opportunity to move forward on the property. PDC is responsible for the incremental cost associated with the environmental remediation of approximately $700,000, which was mentioned prior. The developer will comply with all the PDC business and workforce equity policies. Key milestones, going forward is a 150-day due diligence period, closing within 12 months after due diligence, design review hurdle for closing extensions, and if for any reason they are not able to start construction within 2 years, PDC has a repurchase opportunity. This activates the northern gateway to the Pearl District. It's much needed office space. It promotes construction and permanent employment jobs in the River District, generates additional tax, and in addition, if you note, over $240,000 a year of revenue into PDC Station Place Garage. All of our policies will apply, and it will further implement the district strategy plan. So the action is to request approval of the resolution with the result to sell the property.
Questions from the commissioners? Comments? You know, this has been around for a while. It seems like we've got a pretty good outcome, be my comment. And I think we're maximizing our value out of the property. We're seeing some income from the garage. It's hard not to see why we wouldn't just go ahead with this.
No, I agree, and it's been a bit of a longer process, but hopefully we're at a good spot and ready to move forward. I see there are folks from the development team. I don't know if they want to share anything with us today or not.
I think it's important to note, this is a good thing for the taxpayers. As a taxpayer, I'm glad you did what you did, because you made more money doing it this way than you could have. My only comment is, I hope you take that excess money and you use it for affordable housing, or help the homeless situation.
Fair enough.
Thank you for that unofficial nice comment.
I second that. Thank you for your patience, too. I look forward to the project. No, it'll be a great one.
Okay. Chair will accept a motion.
I'd make a motion to adopt resolution number 7107.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you.
Looking forward to it. Good luck.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think let's take a 5-minute break. We're actually ahead of schedule by 25 minutes or so, 20 minutes. So let's take 5 minutes.